All right. Hello, test check 1, 2. How's it sounding? That is indeed working. Let me fix my speakers a little bit here. And we should be good to go. There. All right, sweet. Well, hello and welcome to another Ableton Office Hours stream. It's been a minute since I've done these. I was out of town on a Monday, and then I had technical issues last Monday, so it's been a little bit since I've done one of these streams. So it's good to be back doing this once again here on the Monday afternoon office hour stream. So generally, the way I like to approach this is it's pretty open-ended. I'm just here essentially to answer any questions you may have somewhat related to making music with Ableton Live. And if there's no questions or anything people want to talk about specifically, I'll just kind of screw around and either make some music, do some sound design, maybe do some mixing, whatever. But I'm just here to kind of like a hangout stream. But you guys are more than welcome. In fact, you are highly encouraged to ask any questions related to whatever it is you're interested in talking about for music. I did have one thing I did want to talk about, and I was just trying it right before stream, and it didn't work. So I might try this one more time. I had somebody in a YouTube comment ask a little bit about Lemur, which is an iPad app that you can use to kind of build your own custom MIDI controller setup. And I did a video on it a while back. I was talking about like live performance setups and the Glitch Mob live setup because they used Lemur for a long time. And I wanted to see if I could just answer that on stream. However, what I noticed is when I open the Lemur application, none of the buttons work and it doesn't let me click on anything. So I might have to wait until I might have to update this. They haven't updated Lemur in a long time, but maybe they did and I just didn't know it. And so I might need to re-download the editor software here. Let me see if it's been updated kind of recently. Yeah, it looks like they're for OS X Intel, and I'm on an M1 chip, so I'm not even sure if this will work on this computer. Although I feel like I've gotten it to work before. So I'm gonna look into that and kind of see what the deal is with this, but it's basically just crashes and doesn't allow me to change anything, which means I can't, unfortunately, answer the question that was asked about Lemur and how to make that work. But if you have not checked out Lemur as an application, I highly recommend checking out. It is really versatile. It's really cool. If you want to have like a customized MIDI controller kind of setup, it is fantastic for kind of building your interface to be whatever you want it to be. So hopefully we'll get into that maybe a little bit next week if I can get the application working. But I literally tried it like 2 minutes before stream, and that was basically it. So I think what I'm going to try doing now is basically just maybe do a little bit of sound design, maybe do a little bit of writing. I've been wanting to do some more kind of atmospheric stuff, and every time I try to write atmospheric stuff, I end up like it's getting like too complicated. I end up putting like too many layers in there. So I'll probably do a little bit of kind of atmospheric sound design. But as always during this stream, if you guys have any questions, things you want to talk about, feel free to toss those in the chat because that's really what this stream is all about. What's up, Bishop? How are you doing today? I feel like I haven't seen you much recently. And Alessandro, how are you doing? Welcome everyone who is just joining. So I did a little bit, I did a video on kind of like atmospheric sci-fi sound design on the channel recently. So if you haven't watched that, check it out. I think it's one of my better videos I think I've done recently. Um, but I want to do something kind of similar. I want to make some kind of like nice roaming atmospheric sci-fi kind of pad sounds. So that's what I'm going to go for, and kind of like explain my process as I go through it a little bit. And I didn't check to make sure that that should be going. Turn it up a little bit. Cool. So a big part of my process when it comes to doing atmospheric kind of sound design is to kind of divide and conquer when it comes to the oscillators, and let each oscillator serve a specific function, and then like work on them independently, and then put them together and then see what happens. No worries, Bishop. I'm just glad you are here and you're around. All right, so what we're gonna do here is we are going to go into, say, like, I really like the collection folder here for Wavetable. And let's do something like that. And of course, most of these wavetables don't really sound that good or interesting unless we apply some modulation to them. So I'm gonna apply LFO1 to wavetable position, and I'm gonna slow it way down, like less than a hertz. And then now that I've done that, now I can go through and start picking out which wavetable I actually like. Let's get a little bit lower. I like that one. That one's a little too harsh, I think. I actually like that one quite a bit. Too low. Now that I find one that I like, one of the things that's really key about a lot of these wavetables is there's a lot of different sounds in them. That's how they're kind of designed. So a lot of times having this big LFO motion here is cool, but we get too many different things in there. So subtlety is really key here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set my amount to be, I don't know, under 20. And then you can find the sweet spot within the wavetable where, as it's moving around, you get all the things that you want. So this one kind of has like 3 different areas. It has like a scratchier part down here, has a scratchier part up here, and it has this kind of like more subtle part in the middle. So it kind of depends on, like, you can kind of like scroll through and find the sweet spots for whatever kind of sound it is you want. So if I want something more subtle, I can keep it in this section right here and not get either of those scratchy parts, or if I want to go down here, we can kind of focus in on whichever area we think sounds the coolest. Let's do this area. Has like a cool quality to it. And just remember, like, when you're doing your sound design, like, you don't need to have crazy amounts of modulation. Like, oftentimes it's like a little subtle motion. You can get a lot more control over what your sound is doing. So I'm gonna speed it up a little bit. I'm also gonna play with the effects controls here, and that way we can I'm just gonna give it like a little bit of motion from LFO too. And also slow that down here. So now we're getting a bunch of movement in there, and again, we can try it out in new places to see where we like it. Something like that sounds kind of cool. And let's do even less of this. Cool. So now we got the right kind of motion movement in here that we want. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this one off, and I'm gonna turn on the other one. Like I said, divide and conquer is gonna be the way to do this. And I'm gonna pitch this one up an octave, which is not something I do every single time I do this kind of sound design, but it's a really easy way just to kind of like spread out your frequencies, get some really nice, cool, interesting sounding layers together where they're not clashing with each other as much. They can kind of complement each other, and each oscillator kind of serves a different purpose. This one's gonna be my lower one, this one's gonna be my higher one, and the two together will create hopefully something that sounds cool. Let's try a different wavetable folder. Let's try complex and kind of see. Again, a lot of these wavetables don't sound that great if they just sit there, so let's give it some position movement. That could be kind of cool. So like a higher layer there, and so again, find a nice spot in here that we like. Yeah, let's try it. Good. Stick with that one for right now, and we'll do the same thing here. Give it a little bit of warp and a little bit of LFO in the warp. Let's do fold instead. And if anybody is joining us, you are more than welcome to ask any questions you may have. Anything related at all to music production, go ahead and toss that in the chat, and I will get around to it. Right now I'm just doing a little bit of sound design, but this is just me just kind of making stuff and talking about it. So you are more than welcome to participate and ask any questions about anything you want. Cool. So we got this sound here. I think it sounds okay by itself. We'll layer it with the other layer. We get something much bigger. It does sound a little cluttered still, so we'll probably have to tweak it a little bit, maybe tone down some of these controls here, make it a little bit more subtle. But that's going to be kind of the base of our sound. And if we don't like it, we can always just try a new wavetable and get an entirely new sound out of it. So from here, it is sounding a little bit harsh to me. So first thing we'll probably do is get rid of some of those higher frequencies. That'll make it a little more subtle. We're also going to go to our volume envelope, give it a bit of a tack, like, I don't know, half a second to a second. Give it maybe like 2 seconds of release. Maybe not quite so much release, not quite so much attack. Do something like this. I'm also going to turn retrigger off of one of the LFOs. This is a really important control. I don't think people realize how important this is. But when retrigger is turned on, every time I play a new note, it's going to reset the LFO. So in the case of my two oscillator positions, they're always going up every time I hit a new note, which I think is fine. But if retrigger is not turned on, it will continually move up and down, and then as I play new notes, wherever the LFO is when I start the note, that's where it's going to be. Which I think in this case sounds cooler. If you have lots of notes coming into a synth, like through an arpeggio or something like that, oftentimes turning this off can be a lot better, because that way it's not the exact same thing every time. As it plays, the LFO is continually moving up and down, which is really what I'm looking for here. Oftentimes, one of the things I'll do here is toss in like another filter, like a notch filter. This can be a really fantastic way to add like a bit of motion to your sound. In this situation, I'm not going to do that specifically because I'm going to tack on a phaser at the end as one of the effects, but this is also just a really handy tool for just getting like a nice bit of motion or movement into your sound as well. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is going to be toss on the unison, maybe just a little classic unison. It sounds kind of cool down there. Usually with unison, I either like it to be like really subtle, like just a couple percentages, or like really heavy. It really kind of depends on what you're going for. This one, I think I'm gonna go a little more subtle. I made like a weird spooky accordion, I guess. So yeah, so that's all I'm gonna be doing inside of Wavetable. I might get a little bit more fancy with the matrix and do a little bit more kind of motion and movement in here. But that's all I'm gonna do for right now inside. Then from here, it's really all about the effects. And the effects are totally up to you. I personally really like going really heavy on reverbs on this kind of sound. So hybrid reverb is perfect. If you have any of the Valhalla reverbs, those are also perfect. Actually, before we do reverb, I'm gonna do phaser just because I mentioned it earlier. So if you're not familiar with the phaser and what the phaser can do, especially for this kind of sound design, it's fantastic. Essentially, just think of it as a bunch of notch filters. So here, if I toss in a notch filter, I just get one of them, right? Which I can then move around to create that kind of interesting sound. And we can check this out with the spectrum analyzer. So here it is with no notch filter. I turn on the notch filter. That's the wrong one. You can see that dip right there, right? And if I move this around, it's a little hard to see because the unison bouncing everything around, but you can see there's that dip that gets moved around as I move this around, which is really cool. I think it sounds great. However, we only get one notch filter in here unless we were to do like a double notch filter kind of thing, and that's totally cool. But in this situation, we can have multiple notch filters. So by just the default setting of phaser is there's 4 notches. And I'm gonna turn the LFO off. So there's 4 notches, which you will see up here. I'm also gonna turn the unison down. There's one there, there's one there, there's one there, and there's one right there. So as I move this around, you're both going to hear and see those notches moving around. Now we can change the number of notches with the notches here, so we could have up to 42 of them, which is usually way too many. But you can see a bunch of them in there. Or we go to like a normal number, like, I don't know, somewhere, something under 8. But you get this cool kind of like shifting in harmonics as you move these around. We can then spread them out using the spread control. So they're right next to each other, or they're spread out. And then we turn the LFO on, now they're moving up and down. So we could have essentially, I don't know, let's do like 5 notches right here that are moving up and down based off of the rate that's set here and the amount that's set here. And you can really hear it moving up and down that way. So that's a lot of phasing that we're doing there. We could make this a bit more subtle by either having less notches, less of the amount on the LFO, or less on the dry wet here. So if you dial it back a little bit, you get, again, like subtlety is really key here in this kind of sound design. Like little tiny bits of motion in there make a big difference, but are really cool. Another really fun thing here that I did mention in that video I made recently, the blend setting here is fantastic. At 0, the left and or all the notches are moving up and down together. If you set this to 1, they move towards the middle and then away from the middle. Which I think sounds kind of cool. We can also, if you hit this triangle, get a stereo LFO. And if you know anything about how I feel about LFOs, you know that I love stereo LFOs. So we could adjust the phase here. So now that our left and right side are going to have different notches. Which is pretty cool. We can also set this to spin mode where they have different rates. So you can see them moving up and down independently of each other, either towards the middle or all up and down or somewhere in between. Like this. And then if we combine that back with our unison that we turned down, we get things kind of like moving and shifting in really interesting ways. And let's go back and turn our release back up a bit. Yeah, a lot of fun stuff we can do with that. And if we want to, we can use the duty cycle, which is a really cool way to like change how the LFO's moving. So you get, again, these weird motion within your notches. What's up, Hef? How are you doing today? So yeah, really fantastic tool. I'm using it like pretty over the top now. I'll probably dial back the dry wet quite a bit, so you still get some of that interesting phasing, shifting kind of stuff going on, but without being too much. And once again, I see there's more people watching now than there were last time I mentioned this. If anybody has any questions or things that they want to talk about, you are more than welcome to toss those in the chat, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. All right, so from here, I'm going to go nuts with the reverb. So hybrid reverb, absolutely fantastic tool. It does take a little bit more kind of massaging than just the standard live reverb to get to sound good. However, I think it sounds really amazing. I think the convolutions are really good. The algorithms are really good. Everything about this is fantastic. What's up, Beatmaker? How you doing? So in the same way, when we were going through our oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 and doing kind of one at a time, we're going to do the same thing for our reverbs. It's a way easier way to handle it because there's the convolution over here and the algorithm over here, and we can choose whether we want both of them serial, both of them parallel, just the algorithm, just the convolution. So it makes a big difference there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the algorithm, and I'm going to get that to sound good first, and then we go to the convolution, get that to sound good on its own first, and then I'm going to use the two together either in serial or parallel mode, depending on which sounds good after I do the individuals. So this is a great kind of methodology for getting the most out of your hybrid reverb because there's a lot of stuff you can do with it, and it can be really overwhelming. So first big choice when you are working with the algorithmic side of hybrid is there are 5 different algorithms. They are all very different. They are all very cool. So it's really kind of up to you to try them out. They're basically like, they're all your basic standard reverb kind of thing, but with like a little special twist on it. I'm a big fan of the shimmer because the shimmer I think sounds great, but they're all worth checking out. So I'm gonna use shimmer in this situation where we're gonna get a lot of really basic basic reverb controls. And then a few extra controls built in here as well that we'll talk about in just a moment. So Eduardo is asking, can you enter fade, duration, and curvature manually valleys, typing in the exact valley, not by dragging all valley? I don't think you can. That's a great question though. Like if we have, let's do something like this. Not on a MIDI track. So if you want to do a fade in here and you want it to be an exact timing of like exact number of milliseconds, not off the top of my head. Nobody's ever asked me for it. I don't think you can. I do just think you have to eyeball it. I'm trying to think if there's like any way that you could adjust this to be a specific amount of milliseconds. Because it doesn't even tell you the timing there in milliseconds. Yeah, and there's nothing down in the clip that would allow you to see that. Yeah, not off the top of my head. I will look into it and see if there is some kind of solution that I am not aware of right now. But uh, as far as I can tell, there's no way to manually set this to be like, 0.2 seconds or something like that. I think you do just have to eyeball it. But I'll think about that. That's a fantastic question. I apologize if that's kind of a disappointing answer. All right, and then Hef was asking, I've made a crazy drum rack some time ago, 16 pads, each having instrument rack with the 16 samples. Wasn't using having an instrument rack in it with 16 samplers. Wasn't using the multi-sam feature because I liked the look of chains more. The problem is when archiving the project, I have to manually 340 samples, not using the project via the project manager, which is a pain in the ass. So your issue is, Hef, that when you finish the project and then you're archiving the whole thing. All right, so I got two things to say there. About Hef's question. Beatmaker, I am in the process of entirely updating my mastering chain. I've been working on this mastering a little bit recently, and so I'm updating my whole process. So I will very shortly, once I've kind of finalized what my new process is, definitely let you in on that and let you know how that goes, and I'll make a video about that for sure. All right, so for Hef, he's got his drum rack that's got a bunch of different samples in here in different samplers. All right, so I'm going to make a mock version of this. So you got 16 different samples in here. You got a chain selector. You got them all loaded up in there. And then this drum rack, which is like your master drum rack template, is in your user library, correct? That's where it lives. You saved it as a preset, it lives there. And then when you load this up in your project, it contains, all those samples, 16 by 16 with the samples. And then when you are finished with the song and you're wanting to archive the project, you don't want to have to save all of the individual files that are not part of the, that you're not actually using, right? So my first suggestion would do with how you save this drum rack, because by default, if you have this saved as a preset, all right, so this is our example drum rack. If I save this in here, like that, this lives in my user library. And then each time I drag this in, boom, it has the samples. It's got everything in here. It's got everything you need, right? Then from here, these files all still live in your user library. They live in here. So when you go to archive this project, none of these samples should live inside your current project folder, unless you did a collect all and save. So if you go up to File and hit collect all and save, then it will, if you hit Files from User Library, then it will take those files and put them inside of your project folder, right? But if you don't do this, if you turn this off here, you shouldn't need to delete these individual drum sounds because they should only be living in your user library. if that makes sense. So if you save it like that, and you don't ever save this drum rack into your project folder by doing a collect all and save, you should be fine. You shouldn't need to go through and delete these unused samples because it's only ever referencing the ones in your user library, which is where all those samples live anyway. Let me know if that makes sense. It's kind of like a weird thing about how samples and things get saved in your user library, but you shouldn't need to go through and delete all of these because they shouldn't actually live in your project folder. That being said, if you are in a situation where all of these files did get saved into your project folder and you didn't want it to go through and rummage through all of them, the solution to me would be to just freeze it. Just like go through, freeze the drum rack, and that way, then you can go through and any unused files, you can delete those because now everything will be in your frozen clip or whatever, right? So if I freeze this, these samples, none of these samples in this are being used anymore, right? Because we're just essentially looking at whatever you actually used. So that's all in there. So that would be the solution if you were in a situation where everything was kind of put into your project folder and you wanted a workaround for it. Just freeze it, and then you just keep the ones you're using, and then everything else you can delete because it's unused. Oh, what's up, Tripathi? So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't. But yeah, so I use a lot of user library stuff, and one day I'll need to save it. Is there a way to not collect the drum rack? I'm not sure if I understand that part. So you're using a lot of user library stuff. Yeah, so the user library stuff will stay in the user library unless you tell it to be saved in the project folder. And the only way to do that is to do a collect all and save. Otherwise, it won't automatically do that. Just to test this out. Oops. I'll show you this in just a second. Bishop, yes, so there is an update on that. I made a video on it that I filmed yesterday and I meant to release last night. The video will be released tonight for Patreon peeps about update for all that kind of stuff. So it's all in the works. So yeah, so if we're in this situation, if I save this bad boy, all right, we'll just save it on the desktop. All right, so here's the project folder for what I just saved. There are no samples that live in here. All of the samples, both in here and this one here, all live wherever they came from, right? They live in which is mostly my user library. They don't get put in here unless I collect all and save. So just be aware of that. That's how that works. So you don't need to worry about there being extra samples being saved in your project folder unless you tell it to. And the only way to tell it to do that is either to record directly into that project folder or hit collect all and save, and then specifically hit these guys here. So you shouldn't need to worry about those extra samples in your drum rack that you're not using. They should not be taking up space on your hard drive unless you did a collect all and save. Because everything else will either be in your project folder or in your sample library or your user library or wherever else you you keep your samples. Sweet. So hopefully that answers your question. I know it's kind of a long one, but that's one of the nice things about the way Ableton Live saves files or saves files, is that it doesn't save them in your project folder unless you tell them to. So you don't get multiple copies of the same drum sound in every single one. I lost my train of thought. You don't get the same drum samples in all your different projects that you use in the same drum rack. They all live in that one place. Yeah, so if you want to do a collect all and save, I would freeze first. So if you freeze this, and then you flatten it, now when you do a collect all and save, it won't take all of the samples from the drum rack because that drum rack doesn't exist anymore. Now you just have the audio that came out of that drum rack. That would solve your issue there, I think. Yeah, Bishop. Occasionally there'll just be those weird spammers in the chat. It happens, and I think it has more to do with how on the ball YouTube is about catching them and stopping them. So yeah, I'm supposed to have a bot that's supposed to be able to catch those spammers, but they get through pretty much no matter what. All right, so Chapathy is asking, I have a question about Max for live devices. Once you download a device, the OS asks where to save it. If I save a copy on my desktop, how do I run it in Ableton? How do I then move it to the user library? That's a great question. So when you download a Max for live device, normally it just puts it in your downloads folder or wherever you tell it to download to, right? See if I have one that I downloaded recently. All right, here we go. This is one that somebody I asked about. So this guy right here, I just downloaded it. So you just double click on it while live is open, and it opens it up in live, right? And then now that it's here, you just hit this save button. It'll save it into your Max for Live folder in your user library. Sure, I'll override it. And then now this is here. Now you have access to it in your user library. And then oftentimes I will color it a specific color so that I have easy access to it in my collections. So that's the process. You just find it wherever you download it, make sure live is open, double click on the file in your folders. It'll open up on a new track in live usually. And then now it's here. Then you just hit the save button and then it saves it to your user library. That I found is the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, you could manually drag and drop the Max for Live file into a folder that you have for your Max for Live devices. That'll also work, but I find this way is pretty easy because it keeps everything in the user library all right there for you. That makes sense. Yeah, then you should be able to delete it from your downloads folder after you've done that, because you essentially save it as a new version. Or, like I said, you could manually drag and drop it into wherever folder you want it to live in, and then have that folder accessible in your browser. That would also work. Most Max for Live patches are very, very small. So, I mean, a lot of times I'll just leave them in the downloads folder because they don't take up a lot of space on your computer anyway. So Hef was asking about, you guys have some really good questions today. It's great. I missed doing the office hour streams. I apologize for being AWOL last week because of the microphone issue. Are there any good color compressors, EQs in Max for Live? Honestly, EQs, I've never really bothered to check out because EQ8 works great. Like auto filter works great, EQ8 works great, and if I don't want to use either of those, I will probably use ProQ by FabFilter. So I haven't really looked into any EQs. Color compressors, it's kind of the same thing. If I need a compressor, I will, unless I need to do something very specific, I will probably just use the Live compressor, FabFilter Pro C, or the Glue compressor. So because I already have kind of go-tos for those, I don't have any that I check out a lot. Let me check to see if there's any. Yeah, it looks like there's some cool ones out there. There's like a spectral compressor. That seems cool. Yeah, I'll have to, you might have linked something in chat. The links don't work in chat. YouTube doesn't let you do that. But I'll look into some of the Max for Live compressors and see if there's any that seem cool. The first one that came up was a spectral, or second one that came up was a spectral compressor. That seems like a lot of fun. Yeah, it seems like there's some cool ones out there. But none that I use as like kind of like go-tos that I use quite a bit. But I'll look into it and see if I can find any that seem worth using. Yeah, Chapati, you are more than welcome to ask questions about mixing. But I appreciate all the fantastic questions you guys have had today. Last week I couldn't stream because I got all ready to stream, and then like as I was plugging everything in, make sure all worked, I'm running two audio interfaces. One of them is the one I've been using forever, and the other one is just from a microphone. That was my workaround for some of the audio issues I was having previously on the stream, and it just didn't work. The microphone on your face, like it would turn on, it would receive audio from the mic, but the computer was not seeing it. OBS wasn't seeing it, Live wasn't seeing it, nothing was seeing it. I updated all the drivers, I unplugged it and replugged it a million times, tried different cables, and then I had to go through the process of updating my entire operating system, which took forever, but that fixed it. So sometimes it does help to update your operating system every once in a while. But that was why I could not stream last Monday. Sweet. So while I'm waiting for Chapati to ask his question about mixing, we were talking a little bit about some of the algorithmic settings inside Hybrid Reverb. So you get a lot of your basic controls, things like decay, size, diffusion amount, like all that kind of stuff. What's up, Kennedy? How you doing? So if we turn up the decay here, we can hear that echoes out. And you'll notice that in shimmer mode, the pitch kind of changes a little bit of your diffusion. And you can control the pitch here and whether it goes up or down. And then you control the amount of kind of like how noticeable that pitch change is here. It's kind of like the dry wet for this pitch change. So if we turn this way up, so you hear that kind of like shimmery echo at the end there, which I really like the sound of. All right, so Chapathy was asking, in one of your streams a few months ago, you said you started projects with fader levels at -12. Why do you do that? Do you keep it at that max level through the production part? What about the end? Do you push everything up? So this is a great question. So yes, so generally when I'm doing my production stuff, I like to make sure I have lots of headroom. So headroom is essentially the distance between the highest volume that comes out your master and 0 dB. And oftentimes, the more headroom that you have, I've found the more you can hear dynamics and the more you can really hear how, like, you can just hear everything better. That's what I found personally. So I know a lot of people produce with like 6 decibel headroom. I personally produce with 12 decibel headroom. I know some people who produce with 18 decibels of headroom. So the individual volume coming out of each individual track is not as important. The volume that of all those things combined together is where headroom really matters. So like I said, I like to have about 12. I'm considering moving down to -18 just to see how it affects things. So it helps you, I think personally, hear things a lot better. It helps you understand dynamics a lot better. It also, and this is probably more important, it also allows you to change volumes and experiment with the volume more than you can if everything is up at 0 dB. So for example, if I have a song where I have, I don't know, 12 different tracks, and if I'm playing all these tracks together at the same time, and I have about, I don't know, a half a decibel or a decibel of headroom, what that means is that because everything is already turned up pretty much all the way, if I want, for example, my kick drum to be louder in my mix, if I turn my kick drum up, that will then bump everything above 0 dB. Therefore, I'm clipping, which is, as you all know, not good. So if you start with 12 decibels of headroom, then if I want something to be louder, I can turn it up. If I don't have any decibels of headroom, if everything's already at 0, basically, if I want something to be louder, I have to take every other track and then turn it down. It's the only way to do that without clipping. So that's one of the big reasons I like to have more headroom when I'm starting, is that I can turn things up individually or down individually and not have to worry about getting above 0 dB. So that's one of the big reasons. So Kennedy, it's not that I turn the master track down to -12 like that. It's that the maximum volume coming out of my master is around -12. And then normally as I'm producing, as I'm working on stuff, things go up, things go down, I add more layers, things get louder, and naturally it kind of does go up from there. So I'm not like super strict on like 12 decibels of headroom always, that's what you need, but more like that's my starting point, is I have about 12 decibels of headroom. And then naturally, if like I said, things get louder, things change, that's totally normal. And then through the process of doing all that, I produce stuff, and then when I get to the mix, I will usually also like turn everything down a little bit more when I actually get into mixing. So again, I have more headroom, and then through the process of mixing, again, things will naturally get louder. And what I'm shooting for at the end of my mix is about 6 decibels of headroom. So the loudest part of my song, when I'm done with my mix, should be bouncing around here. If it's a little bit above, that's fine. If it's a little below, that's also fine. But that's kind of what I'm looking for in the final version of my mix. Then, when I go into the mastering stage of things, mastering is what's going to make up for those last 6 decibels of headroom, and that's where it's going to get me much closer to 0 and kind of finalize all my volumes and get everything kind of on track where I want it to be. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. Don't feel that you have to do it exactly the way. This is kind of a technique that I've kind of found works for me, that I've been using for a long time, and sometimes I ignore it. If you guys have ever seen me produce on the stream, sometimes things are up at 0. I'm not too stressed about it, but I do find that oftentimes I get the best results when I start with lots of headroom, and then kind of things kind of change from there, like naturally through that process. One other thing I would like to point out when it comes to I had a really good thing I was going to mention when it came to headroom and mixing and producing. Oh yeah. So one of the big mistakes I see a lot of people do, or one of the reasons I see a lot of people uh, not produce with lots of headroom, is what they end up doing is they end up having all of their tracks really loud in live, but then the volume going through their audio interface is turned way down, whether they're going through headphones or speakers or whatever. So live is really loud, but their speakers are really quiet. And to me, I've found that this does not do as good of a job of representing the um, what's happening in your song. And I find you get much better results if live is a little bit quieter. Again, meaning you have headroom, however much headroom, 6 decibels, 12 decibels, 18, doesn't matter. You have more headroom in live, and then you crank up the volume on your audio interface going to your speakers or your headphones, you can hear what's happening way better. Right. So remember you have that knob on your audio interface, you can like turn that up and it makes a huge difference. So I've seen people who crank everything inside of live, but their audio interface is turned way down, and you're like, you're not getting the most out of the dynamics of your song by hearing it that way. So I'd recommend trying that out if that's something you notice, that if you try producing at negative 12 decibels, if everything sounds too quiet, turn up the volume on your audio interface. That's part of why you have an audio interface, is you can turn that way up, and then you should be able to hear everything way better. If you don't have an audio interface, you kind of have to just deal with it the way it is. But for the most part, most people producing music are going to have interfaces. And speaking of what Bishop is talking about in terms of accepting clipping, weirdly enough, you can clip in live. It's not a good habit to get into. It's not something I like recommend that you do all the time. But you can actually test this out. You can clip in live, and it does not affect your audio quality. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely artists out there, especially in the like really heavy kinds of dubstep. Those dudes just break all of the rules when it comes to clipping and audio stuff, and it makes people mad. Like the school I used to work at, we had a lot of like old school audio engineering guys who are like, you never clip. It had this many decibels for your mix. It should sound like this, like the very kind of like by the book classic mixing people. And students would come in and they would be like blasting through the master. They'd be clipping by like 12 decibels, and this teachers would be like, "No, you can't do this. That's not right." But it still sounded good. It still worked. Like there are people who can make that work, and it's totally possible. I don't recommend it. I don't recommend making that like as a lifestyle choice, clipping everywhere. But you may notice that like if I play something live, I have to turn up even more. But you can clip in live, and you won't hear any scratching or any distortion. The reason that is, in case you are nerdy about this, is that all of the tracks in live are in 32-bit. Yeah, Merzbow. You just make stuff. It just doesn't matter. It's all noise. It's all distortion anyway. But in 32-bit, you can go above 0 dB. And there's a really great Mr. Bill video on this where he like clips something by like 72 decibels, and then he turns it back down, and you still get dynamics on it. So because each individual track in live, including your master, is in 32-bit, you can go above 0 dB and it doesn't cause distortion. If you go too much above 0 dB, it definitely will cause distortion, and it'll definitely sound like clipping, and it definitely won't be good. But just be aware that like you can clip a tiny bit, and it's not the worst thing in the world. And I don't know if you guys have ever noticed that in live, but it's definitely possible. But regardless of whether you're clipping or not, having headroom in your productions as well as having headroom in your mixes, I think is going to be greatly beneficial to most producers out there. Most people who are kind of like learning their way through mixing, learning their way through producing, and kind of trying to figure out what they want their songs to sound like. I recommend erring on the side of more headroom rather than less headroom when it comes to making music. So yeah, so dithering specifically is the act of introducing noise, introducing good noise to counteract bad noise when you go from a higher bit depth to a lower bit depth. So this is really handy. So when you are working in live, like I said, even if you have your preferences set to like 24-bit, like here in your preferences, you have your bit depth setting here. Mine's set to 24. This bit depth is for recording audio into live, meaning that it's like you're recording through a microphone or whatever going into live. If you hit the record button, this is the bit depth it will record at. However, the bit depth that each individual track, as well as your master, outputs it is 32-bit, which means if you are not working with audio, if you are like, say I'm working with Wavetable and I play some notes, we're hearing that in 32-bit, right? Because it's just MIDI going to an instrument and then the instrument going through all the effects and then coming out here. So we're hearing that in 32-bit, which means audio recorded into live will be recorded at the bit depth in your preferences. Audio that's already been recorded, meaning you just grab a sample or whatever, this already has a bit depth. Where did they move that to? Oh, it's up here now. So this is at 44.1, 24-bit, right? So whatever bit depth that was recorded at, that essentially is the bit depth it will be output at. You can add some effects to it. Usually effects won't add to bit depth, but we're being output at 32, regardless of the fact that this is recorded at 24. Playing a 24-bit piece of audio through live, it will technically be output at 32-bit, but it's not going to increase any audio quality. It's not. You can't go from a lower audio quality to a higher audio quality. Just that it doesn't work like that. However, when you are exporting from live, if it's not the final version of your song, if you're bouncing out to go from like a mix session to like a master session, just keep this at 32-bit. So people saying that one DAW sounds better than the other is complete nonsense. They all sound more or less exactly the same. Back in the early 2000s, in the like earlier days of audio, production work, digital audio workstations and all that stuff, the summing engines were different. And that's why Pro Tools became Pro Tools. That's why Pro Tools was like the big thing in audio for a long time, is that Pro Tools had better technology in their summing. So I'm jumping around putting out a lot of like really nerdy audio stuff. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. But the summing engine basically takes the waveforms of each individual audio track and in your master combines them together into one, master file, essentially, right? One output, which is a bunch of crazy math to do that. It's very, very fancy. And Pro Tools used to have the best one by far. And that's why every recording studio in the world was using Pro Tools. Over the last 20 or so years, almost everybody else has caught up. And then, so now there's probably some differences in the summing engines, not that you will hear. You can't if you produce the exact same song in Pro Tools and the exact same song in Live, and you bounce them out, they would sound the same, more or less, or close enough that nobody would be able to tell the difference accurately, consistently. So summing engines used to be more of a thing. Other than that, it's all about the person who uses it. People can make a dope ass song in GarageBand and make it sound super professional. They can make it in Live. They can make it in Reason. It doesn't matter. I don't think anybody has the ear or the skill to listen to a song and identify which software was used to make it. I don't think that like makes sense. Maybe there's somebody out there who can do it. I doubt it though. So yeah, I think summing used to be a bigger deal in terms of differences between DAWs, but now it's close enough that people can't really tell as much difference. So is it bad to mix at, let's say, like 12 decibels, crank up the limiter, or is it better to reach or almost reach 0 dB and then add like 3 decimal limiter? I mean, I think it kind of depends a little bit on where in this workflow stage you are. If you're just producing and you want a little bit extra volume, this is actually a really cool technique that a friend of mine showed me that he uses. So what he does is when he's producing, he actually turns his master volume up to +6 decibels. And then everything else he kind of mixes as normal. Then when he's done with his mix, he just takes his master, turns it back down to 0. So he mixes and produces with his master at +6 decibels, but never goes above 0, right? On the actual, volume. And then when he's done mixing, he just takes this volume, turns it back to 0, and then automatically he has 6 decibels of headroom. So that's one way you can do it. Let me catch up. So yeah, so then essentially we were asking what the second example there was, is it better to reach or almost reach 0 dB and then add like 3 to 6 decibels to limiter? That's basically mastering. Like when you're done your mix, you have 6 decibels of headroom, and then you use compressors, saturators, EQs, all the mastering stuff, limiters, to bring it up to essentially almost 0. All right. What's up, Johnny? How are you doing? All right, so while editing sections of a song, I'm trying to line up 2 audio files in adjacent tracks before I insert the editing piece into the primary track. Although follow is deactivated when I nudge the piece to the correct spot visually, not in warp mode. That's a it's a complicated question in many parts. So let me see if I can figure out what you're asking here. So trying to line up 2 audio files in adjacent tracks before I insert editing piece into the primary track. The follow is disabled when I nudge the piece into the correct spot visually, not in warp mode. Nudging kicks me to the front of the audio file, so I'm no longer looking at the section I'm using to align the 2 pieces. It's a way for Ableton to react to do so. Okay, let me see if I understand what's going on here. So it sounds like you have like 2 different drums that you're trying to line up, for example. So you have like one thing here, and you have one thing here, but the timing isn't perfect. So you're like trying to manually move this around to line up. Is that kind of what's going on here? And the issue is that like it's jumping out of view when you move it. So like saying you're trying to line these up. Something like that. I guess that's kind of what I'm. Think that's what you're asking about? I don't know. I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Um, I'm guessing that one of the solutions maybe like instead of moving the whole clip around, you shift command, or sorry, is that right? No, it's Alt Shift allows you to move the audio file around without moving the clip around. That might be the solution you're looking for. Yeah, I might need you to clarify the question a little bit because I'm trying to understand. I'm not sure if I get it entirely. Nice, Sven. Yeah, blind tests I think are really funny. I think there's a lot of people who think that, oh, I can identify, I can for sure tell you a difference between, one DAW and the other, or one synth the other, or 32-bit and 24-bit, or like all this stuff. And then when you do blind tests, it turns out that like most people can't tell the difference between a lot of these things. Okay, so Johnny, it seems like you want to be able to essentially do this, but be able to use arrow keys. No worries. I'm still trying to understand your question exactly and what it is you're trying to do. So you're like, I don't know. So you might need to rephrase it a little bit. What's up, Pineapple? I honestly don't use Cabinet that much. So if you guys are not aware about Cabinet, Cabinet is an audio effect that is essentially allows you to like recreate the concept of having like multiple amps stacked on top of each other. And it's really kind of designed specifically to be used with amp. So if you try using Cabinet by itself, if we were to like, this is way too fast, just like toss this on this drum here, it like doesn't sound that good. It makes it sound really far away and you lose a lot. You lose a lot of the kind of like the power of your sound, which is why I don't like it. But basically, you have the number of speakers here and the size of the speakers. So you could have one 12-inch speaker, two 12-inch speakers, four 10-inch speakers, four 10-inch bass speakers. You can have the position of the microphone you can change around. You can change the type of mic, mono, stereo. And it's really kind of designed specifically to be used with amp and after amp. So let me turn this down. So there's the rock on there. No worries, Johnny. I will get back to your question in just a moment. And then you combine it with Cabinet. And it can kind of sound cool, but it only really works when combined with amp and with the dry wet at like 50%. At 100%, it just like, you lose all the power from whatever's running through it. So that's kind of the only situation where I really do use Cabinet is specifically with amp. I've tried to use it with other distortions. It's not quite as cool, but it sounds okay. Keep the dry wet pretty low and then kind of see where it goes from there. But Cabinet by itself is it's just not that interesting, I don't think. All right, so you're trying to line these up, but you're not using the front of the audio file. So you're using like two songs that like are in a DJ mix, and you want to line up one beat with another beat without moving the front. without moving the front and without warping. What's up, Josh? How you doing? Yeah, I guess I'm still like trying to understand the situation here. Because I'm assuming both these songs have already been warped, right? They're already warped, they're already on time. So if one beat is on time here at the beginning, and then you want to line up like this one here without using warping. Yeah, it seems like to me, like why would you not just line it up at the beginning? Sorry if I'm not understanding the question fully here. Oh, we can do something better here. Let's try a more realistic example. What happened to my? There's my DJ library. All right, so we got one song here. We got another song here, right? So this is our fake DJ mix that we're making. And you kind of line up these songs a little bit. So like say you want this song to start right there, right? So this little break section kind of leads into the intro of this song. And then here you want a different part of the song to line up. Yeah, they're going to need to be warped no matter what, basically. Like you need to make sure they're warped. And if they are warped, then it becomes really like, then you just drag it wherever you want it to go and then line things up. And then if you need something to be like shorter or longer, you can like cut things out in like 4-bar sections or whatever. Yeah. Johnny, just let me know if I'm kind of on the right path here with my answer, because I feel like you've got a very specific situation and I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. But also, it's so nice to see all you guys' lovely faces here for an office hours stream. If anybody is just joining us or is new around here, feel free to toss any questions you have in the chat, and I will try to get to them as soon as possible. Okay, so you want to move the whole thing, but you're looking over here. And for some reason, you want to be able to use the arrow keys instead of clicking and dragging to move it left and right. Is that correct? If that is the situation, okay, yeah. With older disco stuff, I found the best way to do something like that for a DJ set is to warp it every like 32 bars. And that way it still maintains a lot of the groove and the timing. Without feeling like overly warped. So like every 32 bars, you can make sure there's like a downbeat on a bar marker. And then in between those 32 bars, it's doing its thing. That's probably the best possible solution for more kind of live musician recordings or older recordings like that. Okay, cool. Yeah, the easy way is going to be to drag it left and right. I don't think like, okay, so if you use the arrow keys, it moves you back to the beginning. That's the situation you're into, where you don't want to do that. I mean, I think the solution is just to zoom out, and then you can use the arrow keys and be able to see everything at the same time. That would be probably the best case scenario, and that way you can kind of see where things line up wherever you need to. Because if you are zoomed in, it does move you to the beginning, and then it makes it hard to line up. But if you're zoomed out, you can see everything at the same time and use the arrows. Does that help? Let me check out that thing you sent. Yeah, that would be another solution here. Just adjust to this over here. This is a good one, Josh. Adjust this so now that we're zoomed in here, we can move this around wherever we want. So say the next song comes in here. We line this up here, then we zoom out, and we just drag it back out. That would also work. So you just cut it down, adjust it as you need to. Once you find the spot, then you move it in there. Yeah, that's why warping every like 32 bars will make it so that it doesn't mess up the groove of the players, but it still allows you to chop up sections and rearrange things as needed. At least that's what I found. Yeah, you can also slice it, move it wherever you want, and then just drag it back out. Those are all fantastic. But yeah, Johnny, let me know if that answers your question. I think yeah, I think the solution is slice it wherever you want it to, wherever you want to do your adjustments. Do your adjustments, and then just drag it back out, and it'll all still be there. And that's going to be the easiest way to be able to use the arrow keys, adjust something in the middle, and then move it around wherever you want it to be. That should work. Sweet. Also, if you guys are enjoying what's going on with the stream and you want to help out, feel free to hit the like button. If you are not a subscriber, you can go ahead and subscribe too. That's also super cool. Yeah, Johnny, as far as I know, there's no way to turn off jumping to the front of the audio when you use your arrows to move it around. That's why slicing it to wherever you want it to line it up, doing your lining up, and then moving back is probably the best solution, because it allows you to functionally do what it is that you are doing, and then in terms of lining things up in the middle, and then you just drag it back out so that it goes wherever you want it to go. Yeah, appreciate the question. Sorry about the confusion. Sometimes when communicating questions through YouTube chats, it can be be tricky sometimes. Yeah, go for it. I do like amp. I think amp is actually pretty cool. I think amp is, it's good specifically for guitar sounds, grungier kind of sounds. I do like amp on like a saw wave or a square wave. I think that can actually sound really good if you're going for a distorted kind of thing. You can get some like pretty cool, interesting stuff with it. Cabinet, as I mentioned previously, cabinet by itself is pretty terrible. It like makes everything sound worse. Like it doesn't matter what settings you use, it sounds kind of bad. And then combine the two together though, you can make something sound pretty decent, but you have to turn the dry wet down. 100% dry wet on cabinet is no bueno. Whereas something like this can actually work kind of well. But here's the issue with a lot of the audio effects in live is a lot of them start with dry wet 100%, and dry wet is something that does not need to be 100%. But like this can sound pretty cool. There's some cool stuff we can do with it to create some nice grungy stuff. Put on a sine wave can sound really cool. Like that can be pretty nice. The presence is actually a pretty cool control as well, depending on which setting you're using. Go back to like a triangle. It can work. But you have to be careful with the dry wets, and then cabinet is usually kind of optional. I normally don't use cabinet. The only situation I use cabinet is directly after amp and with like a 50% dry wet as opposed to 100 dry wet. But I think amp has its places. It has stuff it can do. I like it. And then Johnny's asking, any ideas about controlling the harmonic intervals in Max for Live's harmonic filter? I don't think I've tried the Max for Live harmonic filter. Is that a default one that comes with it? Or is that one you've downloaded? Have I used this before? I have never even seen this before in my life. Let me see this real quick. All right, so we got a bunch of like cascading filters here. Movement controls. Can randomize it. This freezes them. Seems cool. I don't know. I'd have to play around with it a little bit to kind of see what I can do with it. Seems like fun, but the interface is indeed pretty ugly. Yeah. I would love to have more opinions about it, but I have literally never even tried this before. Yeah, you get these like kind of formanty kind of controls with it. Yeah, seems okay. I'm not in love with the interface straight off the bat, but could be fun. I toss it on a drum beat. Oops, wrong one. Yeah, it seems kind of cool. I definitely have to play around with it a bit more to really have more of an opinion about it. That's one of the, it's kind of a pro and a con when it comes to a lot of these Max for Live devices, is that they are, there's usually not a lot of info about how they work, which is fun because it forces you to like actually learn it and actually like play around with it. Um, but like also can be kind of a pain to figure out like some of the settings here, like the slew rate. Um, you have to kind of like figure out for yourself. Yeah, I can see this being really cool. I like the motion. I like how it kind of like randomizes and updates quite a bit. I would need to play with the settings to kind of see like what are the ideal settings for doing different kinds of motion with it and kind of seeing where that goes. It seems cool. I just haven't played around with it before. It definitely could have a prettier interface though. I want to feel like reuse every couple one of these. Josh, I did pick those up and I played around with them a little bit. I was going to use them to make some videos about them, and then I realized that they are very expensive and a lot of people uh, might not be as into them. What were they called? Yeah, it's SLI and K. The Slink devices. They can do some cool stuff, but they are, like I said, a little expensive. I thought they were okay. I need to play around with some more. They have some like pretty cool things they can do. I mean, I like that they're weird, but the LFO is pretty cool. So you can like take this kind of like weird LFO and then apply it wherever you want. So if we, let's try it on like a low pass. And like each one of these can be mapped to something different. So you can have like LFOs that are all kind of like offset from each other that can do different things. The range to not go to 100%. And then you can also add in the ripple to it. They basically like multiple offset LFOs, which is pretty sweet. I don't know. I thought they were kind of cool, and then I looked up how much they cost, and then I was like, I'm not sure that they're that cool. If I'm gonna be completely honest, I think they're really cool. I think that they should be cheaper as a live pack. But you can do fun stuff with it. If people want, if people are interested, this is definitely something I had on like a list of things that I was going to make videos about. And if people are interested in it, I can definitely make videos about them. But I wasn't sure if people would be interested. Again, it's like, it's got some cool MIDI stuff in here, but they're really well designed devices. Like they look really nice. Like if we're comparing this to the harmonic filter that we just looked at, like this looks not only significantly cooler, but like just more interesting to work with, right? This is pretty sweet because you can use it to generate MIDI. I'll have to see if I remember how all this works, but like each one of these can trigger a different note, and when it hits this threshold, you can like play different pitches with it. It's pretty cool. So DJ Amix was asking how to change BPM on a different track. So I'm assuming you mean you have like multiple tracks playing at the same time and you want one to play at a different tempo than the other. If that's the case, that's not quite going to work because everything in live is slaved to the global tempo here. So everything will be at 87 BPM if you're 87, or 104 if you're 104. Everything will always be at that tempo. However, if you have two different clips that are at different tempos, as long as they're warped properly, then they will be in sync with each other. So for example, let me go back to our samples over here, grab a different drum loop. So if I have this drum loop that is at 85 BPM or 82 BPM, and this drum loop that is at 95 BPM, if I play them both at the same time, let's stop the water thing. They're both of these are playing automatically at 95. So even though this one's 82 and this one's 95, they both slave to 95. If I put it at, you know, somewhere between like 87, this is being sped up to play 87. This is being slowed down to play 87. So everything is slaved there. And for pre-made loops, so things that are like 2 bars, 4 bars, 8 bars, whatever, Live does that for you automatically. So I didn't need to do anything to make that happen. Live looked at this file and it knew it was at 82 BPM. It looked at this one and it knew it was at 95 BPM. So you don't need to do anything about that. The only situation where you really need to pay attention to this is if you're using either things you recorded yourself, in which case they'll be at whatever tempo you recorded them at, or whole songs, like a song that's at a, a 3-minute, 4-minute song or whatever. Those are situations where you do need to pay attention to how live warps things and where they are. But by default, by doing nothing, if you drag in a loop into live, it will automatically play at whatever your global tempo is, regardless of what tempo it was recorded at. Hopefully that answers your question. Cool. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to toss this in the chat as well. You guys have had some really good ones today. I miss doing these office hour streams. It's good to be back. Yeah, I mean, technically you can play 2 different clips at different tempos by turning warp off, but it's going to sound terrible. It just doesn't sound good. Yeah, and you can do like polyrhythms, and you can do, there's ways to make things sound like they're different tempos. But there's a reason warping exists, and live automatically puts things in time for you. All right, so until somebody else asks me another question, I'm going to try to remember how this Slink MIDI works. It's basically just a sequencer. So if I hit play, once you hit the threshold, it's going to play notes. And right now the sequence is just 1. Let me see if I remember how to turn on. Let's set this in. So you can put it in specific scales, which is cool. So let's put it in like, I don't know, D minor. And then how did I get the sequence length here? Those are longer notes. All right, so this one's looping there. That's number of voices. How do I get the other voices to turn on? It's been a while since I tried to use this. And then here we can choose like different pitches for each one of these. Oh, there we go. You have to turn on here. So here's different sequences. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. A lot to pay attention to. Let's put it on arpeggio mode. See what happens. Do you manually do this? Nope. All right, let's not put them all in 16th notes. Okay, so each one of these represents a different sequence. Each one of these kind of columns here. This represents different pitches and a range of pitches that you can adjust. This should all be locked into whatever scale you're in. So with just one of them, this is the rate, this is the speed of the rate. Here's just gonna play one note. Here it's gonna loop the note, I think. So as it's looping, it's playing new notes, or just play the one. And then if we turn on this one, we can change the speed here. So we can make it half as long. So it should be half notes. Let's make this one. And we turn this one on over here. And let's make this one faster. And you just like keep on adding new notes onto it. It's really weird as a sequencer. It's like very different than a lot of other sequencers I've played around with. And then we can change how it ripples. We can like keep on adding new notes in here. Let's change the speed of these so we get a bunch of different speeds going on. It's not particularly musical right now, but I think there's potential here. I think there's like things that you can do. All right, here's what we're gonna do. Let's play with our synth sound a little bit to make it. That's a little better. Put some delay on it. Yeah, it's super weird as a sequencer. It definitely strikes me as one of those ones where it's like, you just keep screwing around with it a bunch, and eventually you'll get something cool out of it. Like, this is not terrible. It could be worse. XTL dubs, I have not tried the spellbook. What is that? Like, there are bits that are coming out of this that are actually kind of cool. Like, this sounds like some, like, generative stuff for, like, a video game or something like that. Can we get some harmonic minor going on? No. Did this really convince you to buy it? Is this doing it for you? Let me look at the spell book. Oh, that looks cool. So it gets like geometric automation. I'll look into this. This looks super cool. Actually looks kind of similar to what I'm doing right now. All right, let's get some more waves going on here. All right, I'm gonna be real honest when it comes to a lot of Max for Live devices that are out there. Most of the ones that I will try out or use, unless they are like, unless they solve a very specific problem for me, or unless they recommend to me, I generally stick to the ones that are free, or ones that people will give to me for free. So a lot of the ones where it's like, you know, more than 20 bucks for a Max for Live device, unless it's something that I really need, I'm probably going to pass on it, just because it's a Max for Live device. And a lot of stuff I can either build for myself or I can create in some way. Spellbook looks super cool. I'm definitely going to look into that and see if I can at least get a demo version of that to try that out. I haven't tried Grain Scanner. Most likely because probably Granulator can probably do all that stuff. Well, I have Grain Scanner. I've tried Grain Scanner and I thought it was cool. I didn't try it a lot because, again, Granulator is kind of my go-to for granular stuff. I will play around with it a little bit more and give you more detailed feedback on it because I definitely played around with it once, I think, on stream, and I thought it was interesting, and I think it had some potential. But I don't have a full enough review to be able to tell you whether it's worth like 50 bucks or whatever. But for the most part, I try to stick to Max for Live devices that are either pretty cheap, 10 bucks or under, or free, or something like that. But now that I'm playing with this Link MIDI, I'm actually kind of enjoying it. It's not amazing, I don't think, but I definitely feel like it has some potential for just kind of like generating some sounds. Like, I can get behind this. It's kind of fun to play around with. All right, so for those of you who are not understanding what's happening here, it is fairly confusing. There's basically two parts to this. There's this part right here, which is triggering notes. So it's basically an LFO. Let's do something like this. So it's, let me reset all these guys. Like this. It's basically an LFO. Each one of these dots represents a sequence of notes, essentially, that you can turn on and off here. So if I just have one of them being turned on, it's basically, once this dot passes this threshold, it triggers a note. So if I hit play, it's weird because you can see it moving right now, even though the live is not running, or it's not playing. So if I hit play, whenever this dot passes this threshold, it'll send out a note. The timing is based off of this rate right here, which then can be divided or multiplied. Well, now it's not triggering it. has to pass the threshold by a certain amount or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, it's just sending that one note through. The space of this blue dot here controls the pitch. So if it triggers the threshold when this is higher, it's getting a higher pitch. When it triggers it when it's lower, it's getting a lower pitch. You can adjust the range of those notes here and how they're offset. So you can see now it's triggering higher notes. Or you can make it lower. All right, so that's sending one note out, essentially, or one kind of sequence. If I turn this one on, this one has its own set of notes that's different than this set of notes. Its own rate is set right here, and the own separate way it triggers. So by combining all of these, we can get a bunch of notes that are going to come through. And we can offset them, and we can randomize things. So we can, these multipliers here, we can randomize all those. I'm going to keep the threshold higher. So now only a couple notes are being sent through there. And they're all kind of offset from each other because they're all being triggered at slightly different timings. Now we can go in here, we can randomize a bunch of which notes are being played. We can turn them all on, randomize a bunch of stuff. So it's kind of like combining this section, which is basically our pitches and our notes and how they're being played. And then this section here, which is our timing, they're all in whatever key you have set here. And then you can modulate stuff with this as well. So there's like a lot of stuff you can do in here. It does get very confusing. All of this stuff controls like the shape of our LFO. Yeah, so this is setting it so it's continually playing the note. This is going to be looping that one note, and this is going to be playing it again. Or only plays it once, I believe is what those mean there. The thing that I'm not really sure about is the width of these notes here. Why some of them have a larger width than others. I'm not sure. I want to play around with it a bit more. It's kind of cool. Is it something I use all the time? No, but if I want to like make some cool, weird generative stuff, it sounds kind of nice. Just randomize all your stuff. Like that can work. It's kind of cool. Like that totally works. Yeah, for some weird generative stuff, this is great. It's not bad. However, do I think this is worth the price that they're charging for the Maxwell Live pack? I don't know. It's a little pricey, but I do think it's cool. If you guys are really interested in the Slink devices, this is a Maxwell Live patch or pack that came out, I would say a couple months ago, 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. I don't recall. It has some cool stuff. Like, this is definitely a cool Maxwell Live device. If this was free or like $10, 100% recommend this to anybody because it's a really cool Maxwell Live device. It comes with some other devices as well. But this is, to me, the cool one. It comes with a couple of audio effects. The filter, the LFO and LFO CV are all pretty cool, but the sequencer is really kind of the one I think stands out as being really awesome. Sweet. Well, at this point, we're kind of reaching the end of the stream. I definitely appreciate everybody who came by who asked any questions. I'm gonna hang out for another minute or couple minutes, play around with the Slink MIDI a little bit more. But if you have any questions, things you want to talk about, feel free to toss those in the chat right now. I will be back tomorrow for a Patreon stream. So if you're a Patreon member, I'll be doing that whole thing. And then on Wednesday, I will be doing another song feedback stream. So if you guys want to send me your tracks and have me listen to it on stream and get some feedback, that's what we're doing on Wednesday. But yeah, this is a really good stream. Really great office hours. A lot of really good questions. Appreciate all you guys coming by and saying hi. If you enjoyed the stream, feel free to hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, all that kind of stuff. It's all super appreciated. DG is asking, can Ableton slide glide between MIDI notes on the piano roll? Only if you are doing MPE. Actually, there's two ways to do it. One way does not involve MPE, one way does. So if you want to do slide or glide, a lot of synthesizers will have that built into it. So you can just do that on the synthesizer itself. If the synth or instrument you're using doesn't have that, if you go in and you have two notes like this, you go into your automation, under MIDI control, there's a pitch bend right here. The issue with this pitch bend is that it's not pitch based in terms of like notes. You can't like see it scale up and down in notes. Let's stop this. So you can hear it doing a bend there. So you could figure out how to blend that from one note into another. So that'll technically work to do kind of like pitch bendy stuff from one into the next. The other way to do it is use MPE. So MPE is MIDI polyphonic expression, which generally you need a special controller to do. However, in this situation, we can have this note glide into this note, but you have to use a synth that has MPE responsive, which Wavetable is. So in this situation, if I want this note to slide up here into this note, what you need to do is in Wavetable, go to MPE and have note pitch bend right here, go to pitch. And now if I play this, it'll slide nicely. Like that. So it depends a little bit on what you're doing and how you're trying to do it, but MPE will definitely do it, I'm assuming the way you want to do it. However, you are limited to devices that are responsive to MPE. Wavetable is one of them. I think Sampler can do it now. Yeah, you can do it with Sampler if you want to. I think technically Sampler, but I think it's mostly Sampler and Wavetable that can do it to do those kind of like note pitch bends. But you have to tell the instrument to respond to it. If that makes sense. Okay. Yeah. MPE is pretty sweet for doing stuff like this if you want to make notes kind of glide. And it's polyphonic too, which is really awesome. So if you want to do like a polyphonic glide where you have, let's do it this way. multiple notes slide into other multiple notes, you can do it for multiple notes simultaneously because it's on a per note basis. So I can have this one, oops, slide into this one, which is pretty sweet. But the MP solution will not work for every situation. It needs to be kind of specific instruments to make it work that way. Cool. That's a really great question. The easy way to do it is just use the glide function on any synth that has glide, and then you can just play notes and then they'll glide. Just by going. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Cool. So I think that's going to be it for this stream. Once again, thanks all you guys for showing up and hanging out with me. I greatly appreciate it. The channel's been growing a bunch recently, which is really awesome. A lot of the new 11.1 stuff I think has helped out quite a bit. But I'm always looking for ideas for topics for upcoming videos and content and things I can do for the channel to make it better. So definitely let me know if you have any ideas. But that's going to be it for today. I will see you guys either tomorrow or Wednesday for one of the other streams. Thanks for watching.